now.
In my thoughts, this is not how we were taught to fall in love. Oh, in love, in love. Come outside with me, let's get some privacy, who's in control? Oh, I'm losing, feeling kind of reckless, and I don't wanna mess this up. I'll mess it up. I just want your body, I just want your mind expressed to me. I wanna make you happy. I just want your body, I just want your mind explained to me. Hold me, and oh, baby, I've been thinking about you nearly every night this week. And oh, if you like that, I can be a freak for you, for you.
Hey. Una nena como tú, así quería yo, que comiera bien, Will, todo lo recomendó. Se va a poner contento cuando le enseñé la foto. Me dice, Milito loco, pero eres un monstruo. Y que tú te pasas a casa, se ve que arriba en arraso. Quiero llevarte a casa, si de lo guay de la paz. Y parando toda la noche, pero ten cuidado si me tranca. Tu vida no fue moneta, vuelto, creo que has vuelto loca, chica, venga, que me...
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this lunchtime on LinkedIn session. I am so thrilled to be back again in what is going to be, for first, a series of 3 conversations about money. The reason I started these sessions, Fanny Snaith, by the way, sorry, money coach, should really introduce myself. The reason I started these sessions is because I wanted to open the door to start talking about money. And so I've had various people come on and have a chat on this wonderful facility of LinkedIn Live. It's also being streamed live to my Facebook group, Loving Me, Loving My Money, and also my Facebook page, which is Fanny Snaith Certified Money Coach. So today I am so happy to welcome my fellow money coach, Dennis Harhalakis from Cambridge Money Coaching. And I've also got Will Rainey from Blue Tree Savings. And we are going to be talking about teaching children about money and how we talk to children about money, which is, I know, quite a difficult subject. I have two children, well, 2 girls, 19 and 16. So I've been through all the questions too, and I've been quite successful with some of my answers. I've made a complete failure of some of the other answers, but it is a topic that's well worth discussion. So before we start, let me introduce you to my 2 guests. And first of all, Dennis, hello, lovely to see you here. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you, Fanny. Hello, everybody out there. Thank you very much for tuning in. So I'm Dennis Harhalakis. I am a certified money coach and founder of Cambridge Money Coaching. Prior to being a money coach, I spent nearly 30 years working in financial services. Most of that was in the wealth management industry, based in Singapore. My speciality was setting up product platforms. I moved back to the UK in 2014 and took a couple of years out to build a house. And while researching financial literacy, I came across money coaching. And it made so much sense. I realized this was kind of the missing piece of the puzzle for me in terms of working in wealth and money. And it answers the question, which is, if you take 2 people and you give them the same salary, why is it that one of them can save 20% and the other one's always in debt? And when I came across money coaching, I realized that that's the key to that. That was the key. And I also realized at that point that I knew nothing about my own relationship with money. I was good at saving, but actually my overall pattern of behavior wasn't really that healthy. And so money coaching for me has been an amazing transformational journey to understanding myself and also helping other people. So that's why we're here, and that's why helping parents is so important, because it stops our negative behaviors being passed down to the next generation.
Lovely, that's great. Just before we go on, I've got a couple of comments already coming up for us, and it would be great for anybody to post questions. This LinkedIn Live thing can be quite tricky to join sometimes, but you should have a notification come up. If not, head over to Fanny Snaith's Certified Money Coach page and have a look there. It should be streamed live there if you're having difficulty getting in. But it's lovely to welcome you, people who are watching, and yeah, keep the questions coming. Thanks, Dennis. That was wonderful. Will, how about over to you? Tell us, I can't believe that you're in Vietnam.
Yeah. So no, thanks for having me on here. So yes, my background. So Will Rainey, I'm the founder of Blue Tree Savings. For about 17 years, I was working in the financial services industry. So I was advising some of the world's largest institutions on how to look after their billions of dollars, both in the UK, but also across Asia, based in Hong Kong. But then in 2017, I was just talking to someone about my two young daughters who were 3 and 5 at the time. And they said, just enjoy this time with them. They only grow up once. And it's such an obvious statement, but it had a profound impact on me. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to make the most of this time whilst they're young. So my wife and I put a plan in together to say, right, in a couple of years' time, we're going to leave our full-time jobs and spend as much time we can with our young daughters while they're young. So that's what we did. So in 2019, we left our full-time jobs and we moved to Vietnam, where I am today, and live in a fantastic experience. But the key bit was when we told people about what we're doing, they were like, that sounds great. We couldn't afford to do what you're doing. Yet these people were in the same industry as me. And like Dennis mentioned, they were earning the same salary, if not more, but said they couldn't do that. And it all came down to that they just weren't taught about saving and making their money work from a young age. And they kind of just grew up spending. So therefore, kind of do. And that's something that really kind of hit home to me. And the main reason I started Blue Tree Savings is to try and help the next generation sort of learn about saving so they can have opportunities and live their whatever dream life that they want to live.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's lovely. It's great. What a wonderful story, Will. And I think the interesting thing about the next generation and money is that, you know, we had cash to deal with, and cash seems to be disappearing quite fast, actually. Now we've had COVID, people shops don't want to use it. So I don't know how about you, but I'm actually quite comfortable using plastic, but I know a lot of adults will prefer to use cash, and they think that having something tangible is sort of the important part. But we are going to have to change as we go along. So not only are we dealing with a taboo subject, talking about money, but we're also having to consider it in a completely different way, you know, in a different methodology. So we've got all sorts of different problems coming our way. Anyway, let's crack on. I've got not a script, but we've done some good preparation on this, and we've got some bullet points that we want to get through. First of all, we want to show our slide, don't we, Dennis? I think.
Well, first of all, Fanny, why don't you share with us a little bit about your story, because that's pretty amazing.
Well, yeah. I mean, I had an interesting money story. We all have interesting money stories, but we lost our money from coming from quite a wealthy family at the age of 10. I was very cross about it. My second stepfather was prey to blackmailing and gave all our money away. And my life changed quite considerably that day. And I vowed at that point that I would never be beholden to anybody for money, and that I would become a millionaire. And that really was my thrust, my drive in life. And I began collecting money and saving money and putting it away. And I had a few ups and downs, but gradually managed to get to the 7th figure a few years ago, and sort of announced it to my husband, where he just said, well, it hasn't really got anything to do with me. And we actually realized that it made absolutely no difference to our lives whatsoever. So that opened my eyes to the fact that I needed to learn a lot more about my relationship with money. And like you, Dennis, I ended up at the Money Coaching Institute in America. And from there on, I'm now obviously coaching couples. I love coaching couples and individuals, and I have group programs as well, just to help open the door to talking about money, which I believe is the first step to healing any of our unresolved money issues. So anyway, let's move on, because this conversation is too exciting to talk about me. Right. First bullet point I have got is, what did we learn from our parents about money? Will, do you want to go first?
Yeah, and that.
Oh.
Did you?
Yep. Shall I go?
Well,
The joys of 3 people on a conversation, right?
Yeah.
So what I learned from my parents, so it's more about observation. So my parents, throughout my whole childhood, lived in the same house. So we lived in Essex, and we had a nice kind of 3-bedroom house. And what I learned was my parents got promotions, and you could tell that they were starting to earn more money, but we didn't talk about that all the time, but you could tell that my dad's car was getting slightly nicer, and the holidays were either a bit more frequent or a bit nicer. But we'd never moved house. And there's a couple of times when my parents thought about it, because I remember going to look at other houses, which were like much bigger, and I got all excited, but then they didn't decide to. And I remember asking them a few times as I was growing up, look, why don't we move? We obviously can probably afford it. And my parents always just said, we'd rather live in this house because it's perfectly fit for purpose, and then retire early to the sun. And essentially that's what they did. They paid off their mortgage, and pretty much as soon as I finished university, they went, see you later, you're independent now, we're going to Spain. And they retired very early and went to Spain. And it was just, whilst it wasn't really a kind of sit down and talk to you about money, I just learned so much from that. And I can now witness seeing their life in living in the sun in Spain. And me sort of, at the time I was just starting out in the work and sitting at a desk, and they were telling me about how they sat in the sun and painted a chair just because they were keeping themselves.
Well, look at you now. I mean, again, look at you now. You know, you're already taking a leaf out of there, but that's one of the things that you've obviously learned from your parents about money. You're in Vietnam living a bit of a dream life while you can with your children being that age, which is fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. So I was just learning that patience was just such a key lesson for me and my parents.
What about you, Dennis?
Cool. Well, what's interesting about this is if you look at the slide in front, hopefully you can all see the slide in front of you, is that children learn from what they can see. And so one of the reasons that we wanted to have these conversations and to help you is that because if our children only ever see us spending money, then that's the only thing they're going to learn to do with money. And we need to have conversations about earning money and investing money and saving money and growing money. And that's what we want to help you with today or over the next couple of sessions, because these are difficult conversations to have, and so everybody needs a little bit of help. What did I learn from? What did I see my parents doing? My parents were very frugal, which is lucky in terms of the messaging I got. My father was born in 1919, so that gives you a rough idea of what kind of generation he came from. The messaging was, we don't have enough money and we don't waste money. We never waste anything, but particularly we don't waste money. My father was prone to catastrophizing. He was Greek, so everything was, so, and my mother...
Did he throw plates while he was catastrophizing?
Only at weddings. And my mother was one of these hair shirt stoic types. And one of the things I remember is that she would go to 2 or 3 different supermarkets to do the shopping because a tin of baked beans was 1p cheaper over there, and that's just how she was brought up, and that's what she did. So that was my subconscious inheritance from my parents, and it sat with me through the whole of my life, and that's where my frugality comes from, and it's very pervasive.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think from my point of view, when my dad left when I was 1, I now know him to be, we gave him the middle name of Perfectly Adequate, because he would be somebody who would have a couple of knots in his shoelaces, to hold them together, and, his trousers would have holes in them. And yet my mum was a big spender. And what I think is fascinating is that even though I didn't really know my dad until I was 18, I was very, very like him. So definitely inherited. But I guess I was shown a lot of spending, but I also was shown that where money is concerned, there are arguments and conflict.
So, which is a whole separate topic of its own that we won't explore, but it is fascinating. But what did they actually teach you anything? Did they sit down and go, Fanny, these are the things you need to know about bank accounts. These are the things you need to know about investing. These are the things you
Later, yes, I have a story where I used to ask my dad for sort of money here and there, 10 quid here, 20 quid there. And I was always embarrassed to ask him about money. So I had this idea once that I'd ask him for £1,000 in one go. And so I said, Dad, will you lend me £1,000? And he said, yes, I will. And I said, cool. He said, but you have to pay me back the £846.23 you already owe me. And I said, but I don't have that. He goes, I know you don't. And I said, well, if I had it, I'd give it back to you. He goes, yes, I know. But if I add it to you, it'll be 1,800 odd quid. That was it for me. And that was probably one of the best lessons around money I ever had. But I was a little bit older then. I was probably 18, 19, you know.
Yeah.
But
Will, did your parents ever sit down and have the money chat?
No, not so much. But my parents, well, they claim to, but I can't remember. So it's that impactful. But there's a few little lessons that I kind of learned sort of growing up. One was about debt, which I thought was really, really powerful because it was more of a show me rather than a tell me kind of scenario. So I remember I borrowed a little amount of money. It must have been like £5 or something. And my dad says, you have to pay that back. And I said, okay. And then the next week comes and I had the £5 because I think I must have had a little job. And he didn't mention it. So I was kind of like, oh, okay, maybe I don't have to pay this back. And then later he did say, like, we know you have that £5. Are you going to give it back? And I was like, did the whole usual, you don't need it. You've got money. Why this £5? You'll be fine. And I just remember my dad saying to me, fine, don't pay me it back. But I could just tell by the way he said it what that implied. And straight away I gave him that £5 because there's no way he was ever going to lend me any money after that. And he didn't even say, I'm not going to. You could just tell by the way he went, fine.
That's really interesting.
And it just had a massive impact on me. And therefore my views on it's just more a feeling than a lecture.
Thinking about it, actually, after my mum lost all her money, and I mean lost all of it, we had 76 quid left. She started up a sandwich business where she makes sandwiches. She had 3 little vans and she would have people deliver them to industrial estates. So we'd sell cigarettes, crisps, chocolate bars, sandwiches, etc. And that actually was a good teaching for me because every day we had to work out the cost of the sandwiches, how much we could sell them for, what the profit margin was, and we had to count up the money and all that kind of stuff. So that obviously was a really good learning for me. I was probably about 13, 14 at that time. So that was a good teaching lesson. Playing shops, basically, I guess.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So nobody really had. So now let's sit down and have a lovely session about financial education. That doesn't happen, does it?
They don't. My grandparents set up a bank account and they put savings into it. So they were always very good in that thing, in that respect. But well, I ask every single one of my clients, did anyone ever show you how to manage your finances? And the answer is always no. And you probably say, well, that's why they're in money coaching. Of course, the answer would be no. But I think if you ask most people, the answer is always no. And then, of course, well, if you've never been shown how to do something, what are the chances you're going to get it right?
Yeah.
It's like giving someone a car and say, well, why don't you drive that for a bit and see how it goes?
Yeah.
So this is why we're here.
Yeah, let's move on a little bit. And I mean, the other thing is, I suppose, we can't forget, I mean, I don't know, we played Monopoly for hours when we were kids.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be part of learning as well, and playing shops and all that kind of stuff. So there are those kind of things. So let's move on to our next point that we've got here, is why do parents find it so difficult to talk about money? Before we just move on, though, I'm getting quite a few lovely comments come up.
Yeah, have we got any good questions?
Yeah, and I am noticing them, and we are going to bring them up. I've got a lovely comment here from Tina, who's saying, one thing I always wonder about as a financial educator is how we can ensure continued engagement, interest for kids on the topic of learning about money. Let's pick that up in a little bit. But before we do that, let me get rid of the slide. So that, because I think we've seen that now. And there we are, a bit bigger on the screen. And let's move on to scope. Why do parents find it so difficult to talk about money? Dennis, do you want to go first?
Well, Yeah, there's a long list of reasons for that. Primarily because if you weren't ever told how to talk about money, it's kind of difficult to do it yourself. So some people don't know where to start and they're intimidated by the subject, and that's Will's. This is brilliant because Will's got all of that information you need. Some people are ashamed about not earning enough. If you're a chronic overspender, it's kind of difficult to talk to your kids about budgeting. If your parents didn't talk about money, or if they told you it was wrong or immoral to talk about money, it's, we don't talk about money in our family. That's so we don't do that. It's going to be really hard, and of course that's perfectly understandable. That is what you were told. If you grew up in a family where there was hardship, or you lost your job, or your father lost his job, or you lost money, then talking about money can trigger anxiety and bring back unpleasant memories. And if you've got money difficulties, you can almost feel bad about talking to your children about it. But it's so important for us to do. So I think it's great to call out some of the reasons and say, listen, that's totally normal, that's totally understandable, and it's brilliant that you're here, because what that's telling us is that you want to take this forward and you want to do the right thing for your children.
Yeah. What about you, Will?
Yeah, I pretty much want to echo those points. I think we know that in the UK and most of the developed world, that financial anxiety is like the #1 cause of stress amongst adults. And so all those adults just see money and stress together. Why do I want to put that onto my children? Sure. Let's not talk about it. Wait until they're older. They get good jobs. Hopefully they will live a different life to me. But I think our job is really to say, look, no, the more you can sort of learn and pass on good messages and good vibes, the more likely your children are going to grow up financially healthy. And I think that's what my purpose, starting Blue Tree and talking to you guys as well.
I think one of the things that I've learned from my clients and from my training at the Money Coaching Institute is that if we could just replay some of the incidences that we had as children, I hear, I absolutely love listening to people's money stories. And it's so interesting that if you replay a situation, I always talk about the time when we went to the vegetable store, and I always admired these. I was about 5 years old, always admired these gorgeous pigs. I think they were ceramic or something. I thought Bakelite or something. And Mum would always be doing the shopping with my 2 sisters. And one day I went and I picked up one of these pigs and I dropped it, right? And smashed all over the floor. And Mum turned round to me and she said, "Francis, you stupid, stupid girl. Do you know how much that's going to cost? That you shouldn't touch things that are expensive like that. You shouldn't be fiddling with things like that." And you have that whole feeling of shame and just, and so humiliated and embarrassed. And of course, what happens is we then have a little period of silence where nobody says anything. And you are firmly planting that seed of shame in your soul, right? Yeah. And this is the thing, right? And it's like, I talk to my clients when they tell me similar stories and go, that situation, that small circumstance has made such an impact on your life and helped you to craft your money script and your money stories and your financial blueprint of how you are today. Let's just have a little think and replay it for a minute. Let's go back to the grocery shop and say, so you've dropped it. Mum could have turned around to go, "Fan, what have you done?" "Oh, no, don't worry, darling. I know it was only an accident. Yeah, it's okay. We'll pick up the pieces and it'll be fine. We'll do it. We'll sort it out." And I'd probably be going, "Mum, I'll pay for it. I'm so sorry." "Of course you won't. It's an accident. These things happen. Don't worry. I did say not to touch it, but never mind. I know you liked it." And that my whole adulthood could have been different, right? I said to my daughter yesterday, "So have you spent all your savings?" in that tone. And I then turned round to her and I said, "Connie, I apologise for that. I didn't mean that to come out as it sounded. You're not working at the moment. Have you dipped into your savings quite a bit? There's no criticism of you." Notice, I think the importance is that we are allowed to apologise to our children. And I think it's really important to think about what we say to our children and how we say it, because you can prevent a whole heap of damage right now at this, at point, especially at the ages that your children are, Will.
Yeah, I think that's going back to my parents as well. I think that I've spoken to Dennis about this before, about putting these self-limiting beliefs and stuff that come down. So you have the whole money doesn't grow on trees piece. And again, I think I was very, very fortunate with my parents that even though none of my family had gone to university, there was never any limits put on me to say you would not be able to go to university, and whatever you wanted, you could have it as long as you worked hard for it. And they just encouraged. And it was never that boundaries. And I think that's, very lucky in that respect, because lots of people are like, well, look, we don't know about money. We're not very good with money. Therefore, don't get your hopes up, they're putting these limits on their children, and we're all hostage to our limits.
I noticed though you did attach to the end of your little statement, as long as you work hard. One of those beliefs, isn't it? You have to work hard for your money. You have to work hard for what you get. So, we have these things we don't even notice. Let's move on to being helpful, because that's what we're here for, right? And this is where you two guys, I'm sure, are going to be fun. You're going to be plants, be really helpful to parents who struggle to talk to their children about money. How do we get started? Where do we start? Will, do you want to?
Yeah, too. So that's why I started Blue Trees. I started talking to my kids about money from a young age and sharing that with friends and family. So there's some really, really good books that I've read. So there's adult ones. So there's The Richest Man in Babylon. There's Simple Wealth, Inevitable Wealth, and there's even kids' book, which I think is fantastic, which is the Save Your Acorns. And all of them.
Rob Gardner? Is that Rob Gardner?
Yeah, fantastic book. But they all reference linking money to sort of trees and seeds, and I think that is so powerful. So with my kids, we sort of started talking about money, like seeds. Your role is to try and grow your forest over time, and it was just fantastic. They conned onto it really quickly. They got that money isn't just for spending and giving away those seeds, but if you save some of them, then they'll grow. And there's a fantastic YouTube video of someone called Jadfer Pang, and he's an Indian man, and 40 odd years ago he went to this barren wasteland near his home and planted a seed every day for 40 years. And now he has his own forest, which is bigger than Central Park. And I think it's just such a good visualization. And now he lives off his forests. And that's why I call my company Blue Tree, is that when I'm talking to my kids, they say to me, instead of saying, how much money do I have? They'll say, how many blue trees do I have? And we have a little spreadsheet tool that helps them. And we have now lots of different analogies. So if they're saving up for something, they're putting money in their flowers so they can grow and use those to buy toys. But if they're investing, then it's these blue trees that pop up. And it's just a lovely little conversation that we can have in a language that they can really engage with and talk to their friends. They're like, oh, I've been planting some blue trees, and whenever they get pocket money. So I think just having that kind of visualization just makes it more engaging, makes it a lot more easy for them to understand very complex topics. But the key one is it teaches them about compound interest. You just say you have a tree, it produces seeds, those seeds plant, you get more trees, they produce seeds, and you have your whole forest. And compound interest, notoriously hard to explain, but just the kind of mindset of it is quite simple with those
it's really
seeds,
good.
money. So I would encourage every parent to talk to their younger kids, especially, but even older kids and adults. I think it works beautifully as well.
There's a lovely way to think about this, which is how many times can you fold a piece of paper over? Have you ever had that conversation? So for those of you who haven't come across this before, go and research this, unless you want to put your answers into the thing. But how many times can you fold a piece of A4 paper? What's the maximum number of folds? The answer will surprise you.
Neil, start folding a piece of paper. I have my trusty assistant here looking at the chat.
So one of the other messages I think is that you don't need to know any of this stuff before you start. I think this is a beautiful way to start on a journey of discovery with your children. Depends what age they are, but I think Will, your stuff is accessible whether your child is 5 or 15, because it's got such fundamentally strong core concepts around how to explain how to grow money. And actually that is, I mean, I know the answer is compound interest, but that's not a concept that a lot of people have got a big handle on. So yeah, it is kind of scary if no one's ever shown it to you. So you don't need to know the answers, but you do need to be prepared to go on a journey with your child and go and find this stuff out. And it can be fun. Will's stuff is fun because he's explained it to his daughters of 8 and 6. My boys are 19, 17, and 15. So we've moved on a little bit from that. But even so, it's about wanting to explore how you can help your children and ways to explain how you can grow, how you can save, how you can invest, how you can do all those things other than spending. They know how to do the spending.
Yeah, it's interesting because with my two, when we're learning about money, one of the ways I enjoyed most about teaching them about money was taking them to the supermarket when we could go to the supermarket freely. And we'd start off in the vegetable department, and I would send Ren off to get the nicest head of broccoli for under a certain amount. We don't want to, we've got this amount budget. Which one can you find that's going to be the nicest one for that? And Connie would be sent off to get the carrots, etc., and all that kind of stuff. And you can make it all into a fun trip. But thinking about investing is that both of them were encouraged to have a financial freedom account from a very young age, and with the view that they never spent it. So using the terminology like the Golden Goose. So in the pantomime you have the Golden Goose, and you fatten the Golden Goose up enough, and what does it start to do? It starts to lay golden eggs, and so therefore you don't want to kill the Golden Goose, because if not, you're not going to get any golden eggs. And now that Ren was 16, we had a look. She saw me looking at some charts of the stock market the other day, and I started to show her, and then I opened up some of her investments in her junior ISA, which we've got, a tracker following the S&P 500, which is the top 500 American companies. And I said, look, this is what's happening. And this is, there's Amazon, there's Facebook and all that. You own a little piece of that. And then we started looking at candles, red candles and blue candles. And I was showing, I said, it's all just opinion. It's just based on buyers and sellers. And she was just standing there staring at the screen. And then we stopped and she goes, so why doesn't anybody tell us about this stuff? Yeah. And I go, well, there's the question. I am now, but it's like, yeah, you're right. But so we had the question come up from Tina when she said, how do we ensure continued engagement, interest for kids? I think that's a really good question, because you sort of say it, but how are you going to say it again and keeping it going again and again? I know you've got the wonderful bit, Will, where you're talking about how many blue trees have you got, which I love that. But I get it, keeping kids interested. And I suppose the best way to do that is with money, but you want it to be growing at a certain rate. I don't know. Are there lots of different ways that we can do it?
Yes, I think, the big one is to have pocket money. I think I'm such a big believer that pocket money is the most, and I think we're going to talk about this more in one of the other sessions, but that's just a perfect way for having those conversations. So every week you're kind of opening up the door to allow those conversations to happen, whether you're talking about how has it grown, how is it, what are you going to spend this money on, and just always having that little conversation. So again, you can link it back to, in my case, blue trees and flowers, etc. So it's not just a one-off conversation, but it's a weekly kind of conversation about that. And I think that is, the more that they are using money, the more they're going to engage with money, and hopefully more they're going to build great habits and interests in money. And that's why I think pocket money is just so powerful.
We're going to move on to the tips for parents and those difficult questions. And before I do that, and Dennis is going to take the lead on this one, Simon Jones, who I know is a financial advisor, I think an awarded financial advisor, if I remember correctly, he says he's got children of 4 and 18 months. And he says, I'm keen to start as early as possible. My wife thinks this is too young to start learning about money. What are your views? So maybe we could just address that one first before we start going into those difficult questions. Personally, I don't think that any age is too young, because you can always start playing shops. You can always start just counting things and buying things from each other and just trying to establish values between, what do you think that's worth? How many will you give me for that sort of thing? Even if it's beads, matches, whatever it might be. What are your guys' opinions? Dennis, what do you think?
Yeah, I love that question, and I'm going to ping it back to Will because Will has a fantastic thing that he did for his godson, don't you? So in terms of doing things for your children, you can start at what age did you start with your godson?
Oh, when he's about 1, I think. Yeah, 1 year old. Just giving.
So why don't you share that? That's a beautiful story.
So just because we're asked to be godfather, which is very very nice for one of my best friends. And instead of buying a gift, I decided to set up an investment account, or just give them a bit of our investment account. So every month, I'd give them £10 worth of investments, such that when they eventually become 18, they would go from the godfather who never gave them any presents to the godfather who hopefully would give them a nice lump of money when they're 18. But
I love
my
that.
also goal would be to sort of educate them about that and show them as it kind of grows over time as they get older, that there's this money that they're seeing. So on their birthdays and Christmas, having a little note to say, this is how much you've got at the moment. Just so that when they're seeing this as a way of delaying their gratification on their behalf. And I think that's my response to Simon's question is, I think, it's a great question. But yeah, it's never too young. Clearly, talking about money itself there's a kind of an understanding limit. But the most powerful lesson or trait about money is patience. And you can start teaching your kids about patience from such a young age, even if you can have half your pudding now and half later, and getting them to not have everything here and now, and trying to help them resist that temptation to have everything here and now. And again, it doesn't have to be money related, but it's a money trait that you can sort of talk to your kids even when they're like 2 years old. But yeah, in terms of pocket money, I started my kids at about 4 years old, because by the time they're 7, they're going to have a lot of their habits already formed. So the younger, the better.
I think, well, it's really interesting that they have, one thing that really gets me is they have all those Christmas adverts that are on where they show these amazingly wonderful toys with pixie dust added to it when they've done the advert, right? And I remember my dad buying Ren a battery operated potter's wheel, right? I mean, you just know what it's going to be like, don't you?
Messy.
Well, it's not even going to turn, is it? I mean, a battery operated potter's wheel where you're going to put, it's just ridiculous. And I think it's a good idea for even when kids are little, to actually start highlighting the illusion of the fakery on television and in magazines. Because you see, I used to love those Christmas adverts, saying, oh my God, these amazing toys. And then you get them, and quite frankly, they're crap. Yeah. And I don't think it should be allowed. I think that's also part of our responsibility to actually teach our kids that you are going to have messages thrown at you left, right and centre where people have been paid thousands of pounds just to get you to buy. Yeah. And to understand that. And
every year it's getting cleverer and cleverer how they're doing that and approaching our kids. Social media is making it 10 times.
So let's go on to these tips for how we deal with those difficult questions. What do we mean by difficult questions? Dennis, do you want to take the lead on this?
Yeah, so I kind of split this into 3 sections. There's questions that are kind of technical, like, how do I save, or that are kind of specific around, what is the stock market, daddy, or mummy even. What's compound interest? Maybe your 4-year-old wouldn't come with you with compound interest, but you may get a question on the stock market. What is saving? What's investment? What's going on the Reddit forums this week? So Will's got some great answers to those, because he can explain taxation and complex topics with a few trees, which is brilliant. So we'll come on to those in a second. But the ones that I think stump most people are kind of the whoa questions, and they are things like, are we rich? How much money do we have? How much money does how much money does daddy earn? What is our house worth? And these are the questions that stump most adults, because it triggers their own issues around money, their own issues around self-worth, and a whole bunch of things that, when an 8-year-old asks, are we rich? What is the answer to that question? And so in our society, and one of the downsides of schools is that they teach people that the person with the answer is the smart one, not the one with the question. They're like the idiot, time waster. And that's a very strong message from schools. I know they tried sometimes, to avoid that, but essentially what we need to do, there's two things that are really important here. One is to make sure that children understand that asking questions is fantastic. It's normal and it should be encouraged. And we need to make sure that asking questions about money is also okay. So this is the other thing to understand is this is a teachable moment. So when someone comes to you and asks you a question, they're open for learning. So if we shut that down and we go, "Oh no, we don't talk about money in this household," or "Go and talk to your father about that," or whatever it is, if we shut them down, we're sending a message about money. We're sending a message about asking questions about money, and we're sending negative messages. So we need to be very careful around how we respond. So you're probably wondering, how do we respond? All right. The first thing to say is, that's a really interesting question. What made you think about that? And this has two things. There's two parts to it. The first one is that it sends a positive signal around asking questions around money. It's not a taboo subject. You don't want to put your children off. You want them to feel safe asking questions around money. And the second thing is you're going to get a little bit of context to this question. And sometimes the question just comes out of fear, and sometimes it comes out of curiosity. So if your kids have had a PSHE lesson on finance, they may well come home and go, "Oh, that's interesting. Let's ask about the family finances." And so shutting it down would be wrong. You may have a question from your child because the parents, or they may have a friend whose parents have lost their jobs, and so they're actually worried about the family finances potentially. So get yourself a little bit of time to get some context and go, "Oh, that's really interesting." Now, when you've got some context, you can start to explain things a little bit more. So if the question really is, well, what's daddy's salary? You can talk about how a certain amount of money comes in and we have to pay taxes on that, and then we have expenses on that, and you can try and break it down a little bit so they got a complete picture. Now, if they're really not interested in the answer, they'll just get bored and walk away, and that's fine. If they are interested and they are interested in learning, then it's a great teachable moment to have a much broader discussion. So if the question is, how much is our house worth? You can show them where to look it up on the internet, and you can have a broader conversation around what's the difference between a house and a home. A house is a structure, a home is full of the values and the love that we put into it. Why do some houses cost more? Why do they cost less? Different areas, different number of bathrooms, maybe. And you don't have to baffle them with maths. It's just about showing that you're open to having a much broader discussion around the topic. The main thing is not to look shocked and not to shut it down.
I agree. What about you?
That creates a negative response in kids, and they'll carry that forward for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
So those are the whoa questions. There's no right answer, but just thank them for the question and try and get some context around it, and then you'll know how to answer it.
Yeah. Will, you got anything to add?
No, I love that, what Dennis said. I think not just in terms of money, but I love the one I heard recently, which is if a child asks you a question, to respond if you don't know the answer, and in case of money, most parents might not know the answer, is to say, let's find out together. I think that's just such a nice way of being positive, but also not showing that you don't know, because you're just trying to show we can do it together. I think that's great. I'm doing that with my kids now. They're getting to an age where they're asking me about certain dinosaurs, and I'm like, let's find out. And it's a nice together moment.
Let's go on a journey of discovery together. That's a beautiful thing. It really is, because it sends a number of really positive messages about how adults can learn as well, and how you can learn with an adult. and how it's, if you don't know the answer to something, it's okay to say so. You can move forward.
And let's face it, there really are some difficult questions. I think one of the most tricky questions I think I've heard somebody tell me was, how come, mummy, we've come on holiday, we can afford to come on holiday, but we haven't got any money to spend now that we've got here? That was a good one. But I think, again, with all of these questions, and I've had them from my girls, why's my friend got a new Apple phone and I've got this rubbish iPhone 4 or whatever it is, and I think with all of those questions is to actually answer them with honesty. And, to act, but thinking before we speak, taking that moment if we need to go, oh, this one. And actually then turn around and go, do you know, that's interesting that you asked me that, but such and such has got a new iPhone 11. You're only 13. My view is that an iPhone 11 costs X, or that's my perception that it costs X. You might tell me that it costs different. And right now, for me, that isn't how I would choose to spend my money, especially with you at being 13 and the fact that you dropped the last two and smashed the last two screens, something like that. But do you know what I mean? Just to approach it with a bit of openness and a bit of honesty.
Yeah, well, you can even dial it back a little bit, because those sorts of questions are like, why won't you buy me this? And you're the meanest parents in the world, and all those sort of things. And, my friend Sam had it.
Yeah.
These are questions. We need to get away from the subject of money and talk about values. Essentially, they're different values, and your children will have different values to you because they're children and you're not. So if you can frame the conversation around different values and respect that they have different values, you're in a much better place. So things like, I could buy that for you, but if you look at it, why don't you hold it? It looks really cheaply made, it'll fall apart. Or maybe, this is made with child slave labor in Vietnam. Sorry, Will, wherever. It's take a slightly broader values-based approach to it, and also recognize that these things are important. So I recently, one of my clients was sharing with me about being at school, and she said at some point I noticed that we had the worst trainers, and she wrote this down. I'm quoting from her bio. It said, in school, trainers are important.
Yeah.
We know that, right? So be sympathetic towards it. And if your child wants to buy something that you disagree with, then you can say, why don't you save for it and I'll match it? So you're teaching them to move forward, even though you disagree with it, but you're saying, if it's important for you, why don't you demonstrate some positive behaviors and I'll match it, right? You save some, I'll save some, and you can have it. I'm not going to give it to you. You're not going to get it for free. You need to invest in it yourself, some time, some effort, and then we can move forward. Because I think that sends a positive, it's a positive way to have a discussion about something that you may feel reluctant to do, but you don't want to shut them down completely on it.
I'm just very I'm just noticing the time, and it's nearly 10:02 now. We've got a couple of comments come up, which is great. Will, so we've got a message from Matthew Newnham. Hi, Matthew. Wonderful discussion here, Fanny, Dennis, and William. Great practical candor and practical insights. P.S. Will, I'd love to hear your answers to your children on dinosaurs. Haha. Maybe next time. And then we got the doctor in the house, Dr. Nikki Ramskill, who's also money coach. She does
hi, Nikki.
Yeah, does wonderful stuff with money. And she's written, my partner's mum used to say he could have what he wanted, but she'd only pay to a certain point, and then he would have to find the rest through work. That taught him a lot. Brilliant. I love that. I love that. So look, it's coming up to 10:02. I haven't got any other questions in the chat room at the moment. I don't think, have I? Trust the assistant Neil. We're okay. If you want to, if you watch this on replay, please put replay in the comments. And post some questions for next time, because there is going to be a next time. So before we trot up, just really, really briefly, let's just have a couple of takeaways. Dennis, what would you like people to take away today? Just really swiftly, if you can.
So really swiftly, never shut down money conversations. And watch your own money behaviors.
Fantastic. What about you, Will?
Start the conversation early, and use money as seeds as a nice little visual for your kids to really kind of visualize money and seeing it grow.
Excellent. I reckon my thing is I just say get kids working as quickly as possible, get them to do the shopping for you at the supermarket, get them to work, get them to go through the receipts and add things up, start playing shops, and just allow yourself to be honest. I think just allow yourself to notice if you feel uncomfortable. And actually, because kids teach us so much, right? And I think we can learn so much from our children if we actually listen to their questions and see how we feel, and then how can we move forward from that to help them. Victoria has just said, my lad once saved for his Nintendo. In the end, we brought him one for his birthday, and he had the cash to use on a laptop instead. Yeah, but it's all about effort, and that's brilliant. So next Friday and the following Friday, we're going to have sessions 2 and 3. What are we going to be talking about next week? Do we know?
Next week we're going to get practical. We're going to be talking about financial literacy, pocket money, bank accounts, all those things that you need to have to teach your children about managing money.
Excellent. Is Will got anything to add to that?
No, I'm just looking forward to it, and it's been
brilliant. Okay, so we're going to sign off now. One thing I would just like to say, if anybody's watching this or replay, the track played at the beginning was when the countdown timer was going, the little man running around the clock, was the latest single from my daughter Ren. This is how I'm pushing her out to work. She's 16. She's a budding singer-songwriter. I'm going to post the link in the chat now. It's available on all platforms. All your support would be gratefully received. We've got one more question. I have a question about that. My son borrowed some money from me to top up for something he wanted to buy. He's 13. What can I suggest to him to do to earn some money to pay me back? I think that's next week's question, isn't it? Regina, you're going to have to come back next week because we're going to be talking about property, and I can see that is going to come up in the conversation. Do you think, guys?
I think so. Absolutely.
So thank you so much for joining us, Dennis and Will. Thank you to my trusty assistant, Neil, over there, who is monitoring the comments. Thank you all very much for joining us this lunchtime. And it would be great if you could post lots of questions that we can address next week. And also come back and join us again at 1 o'clock next Friday. If I could remember the date, I would tell you, but it's 1 week today, the 12th. Thank you very much. So that's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, and we'll see you all next week. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.